We live in a world that glorifies connection. You're told to be more social, to stay plugged in, to surround yourself with people as a measure of success and happiness. Loneliness is framed as a flaw, solitude, a punishment. But what if we've misunderstood something fundamental? What if time alone isn't a sign of weakness, but a hidden superpower? Think about it. When was the last time you were truly alone? Not just without company, but without distractions. No scrolling, no background noise, no performance for anyone else's expectations. Just you, your thoughts, your breath, your inner world. It's uncomfortable for most people, even frightening, but that discomfort is often the first step towards something profound. We've been conditioned to fear solitude. From childhood, we're rewarded for sociability, for being part of the group, fitting in, staying busy. Rarely are we taught the value of stillness. Rarely are we told that being alone can actually be good for us, not just in fleeting moments, but as an essential part of a balanced life. This isn't about isolation. It's about intentional solitude, about choosing to spend time with yourself, not because there's no one else, but because you deserve your own company, because who you are when no one's watching might just be the most honest version of you. Solitude allows for something social interaction rarely does: self-reflection. Without the noise of others' opinions, without the pull to perform, you can actually hear yourself think. You begin to notice patterns in your thoughts. You start to understand what truly matters to you, not what you've been told should matter. In that space, self-awareness begins to grow, and from self-awareness comes power. The power to make conscious choices, not reactive ones. Being alone also gives you emotional space, a buffer from the constant input of other people's moods, needs, and energy. And in that space, your own emotions finally have room to breathe. You can process what you're feeling without needing to immediately explain or justify it. You can sit with your sadness without being rushed out of it, or savor your joy without feeling the need to share it instantly. Psychologists like Carl Jung and Rollo May have long argued that solitude is necessary for personal growth. Jung called it the path to individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, separate from the roles you play. May too believed that solitude wasn't a luxury, but a developmental necessity, the crucible in which we forge our inner strength. And in an age of burnout and emotional overload, solitude is also a powerful tool for reducing stress. When you're constantly interacting, your nervous system rarely gets a break. Your attention is split. Your body is in a low-grade state of alert. But time alone allows you to reset, to breathe deeper, to slow your thoughts, to reconnect with your own rhythm. That reconnection is essential, because when you begin to feel whole on your own, you stop seeking wholeness in others. You stop trying to fill internal voids with external validation, and that changes how you show up, in love, in work, in life. So maybe it's time to challenge the story. Maybe solitude isn't a problem to be fixed, but a gift to be embraced. Not something to escape, but something to lean into. A mirror, not a wall. Because the relationship you have with yourself, it's the foundation for everything else. There's a quiet genius that often emerges in solitude, not in the form of loud breakthroughs, but in subtle sparks. Moments of insight that only come when your mind is no longer trying to please or impress. When no one is watching, something within you finally wakes up. History shows us this clearly. Virginia Woolf found her voice in a room of one's own. Albert Einstein took long solitary walks to think. Nikola Tesla was known to withdraw for hours, sometimes days, to cultivate his wild, revolutionary ideas. They weren't retreating from life, they were retreating into it, using solitude as a lens, not an escape. Solitude allows the brain to shift into what psychologists call the default mode network, a state where we're not focused on external tasks, but rather daydreaming, reflecting, making connections. It's in this state that creativity thrives. When your mind isn't occupied with what others think, it becomes free to explore what you think, to let imagination wander, to connect dots that didn't seem connected before. But it's not just about big ideas. Solitude gives you space to experiment without judgment, to try something new and fail privately, to play again. Creativity, at its core, isn't just about producing something brilliant. It's about tapping into that part of you that is alive, curious, and unfiltered. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote, The most common form of despair is not being who you are. In solitude, you begin to shed the layers that aren't you, the performative mask, the curated identity, the borrowed beliefs. You return to something simpler, truer, and often more inspired. And then there's mindfulness, the art of being fully present. It's something we often chase, but rarely experience. Life pulls us in 1,000 directions. We multitask, we scroll, we fill silence with sound. But solitude slows us down. It asks us to notice the way sunlight filters through a window, the texture of your own breath, the rhythm of your thoughts. This isn't romanticism, it's neuroscience. Studies show that intentional solitude, time spent alone without distractions, actually reduces cortisol, the stress hormone. It lowers anxiety. It improves concentration and emotional regulation. The nervous system, given time and space, resets. And perhaps most importantly, solitude teaches you to find peace without needing something to distract you from yourself. That's a rare and underrated kind of strength. Because if you can be alone without feeling lonely, you're free. You're not dependent on constant stimulation to feel alive. You're not seeking constant affirmation to feel worthy. You become more present, not just with yourself, but with others too. When your inner world is clear and grounded, you show up differently in relationships. You listen more deeply. You speak more truthfully. You stop demanding others complete you, because you've learned to enjoy your own company. Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The most precious gift we can offer anyone is our presence. When mindfulness embraces those we love, they will bloom like flowers. But that presence begins with you, with sitting still, with being alone, with learning how to listen to yourself before you speak to the world." In a culture that equates productivity with worth, solitude can feel indulgent, even lazy. But solitude is not idleness. It's an intentional pause, a time to reconnect, to reimagine, to realign. So the next time you find yourself alone, resist the urge to fill the silence. Don't reach for your phone. Don't open another tab. Just sit. Let the stillness speak. Let the quiet show you what your busy mind keeps drowning out. Because in that stillness, something sacred stirs. And if you stay long enough to listen, it just might change everything. So, what does it look like to actually embrace solitude? Not as a concept, but as a way of being. It starts with a shift in mindset, to see alone time not as a gap to fill, but as a space to grow, a chance to tune out the world long enough to finally hear yourself. Because here's the truth, solitude isn't isolation, it's intention. It's you choosing to be with yourself and finding that you're not such bad company after all. Many people fear solitude because it confronts them with themselves. The silence can be deafening if you're used to drowning your inner voice in noise, but the fear is usually a signal that there's something inside you asking to be heard. Maybe it's an old wound that needs tending. Maybe it's a dream you've ignored. Maybe it's just exhaustion that finally wants to exhale. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom." What he meant is that solitude is where we reclaim agency, where we stop performing and start living, where we stop pleasing and start listening. Start small. Carve out 15 minutes a day, not for scrolling, not for tasks, but for solitude. Sit with a cup of tea. Go for a walk without headphones. Journal your thoughts without editing. It doesn't have to be grand or dramatic. What matters is presence, consistency, willingness. Over time, those small pockets of solitude begin to build something profound, self-trust. When you keep returning to yourself, when you stop abandoning your needs for the noise of the world, something in you begins to feel whole again. Not complete, because no one ever is, but whole in the sense that you're no longer fragmented. You're not looking for someone to rescue you from your aloneness. You're learning to hold it, and that changes everything. You begin to choose relationships differently, not from desperation, but from alignment. You no longer fear being alone, so you don't tolerate what makes you feel lonelier in someone else's presence. You stop chasing attention and start craving connection. And ironically, that's when true intimacy begins, when it's not rooted in fear, but in freedom. You also begin to live more authentically. When you spend time alone, you remember what lights you up. You reconnect with your values, your dreams, your voice. You stop comparing because you're too busy becoming. Solitude reveals what matters, not to your followers, not to your boss, not to your partner, but to you. Psychologist Rollo May once wrote, "In order to be open to creativity, one must have the capacity for constructive use of solitude." But solitude doesn't just open the door to creativity, it opens the door to peace, to clarity, to purpose. It becomes the quiet soil where fulfillment takes root. And perhaps most importantly, solitude teaches you how to love yourself without conditions. Not in the Instagram quote kind of way, but in the quiet, steady, radical way that says, I am enough, even here, even now, even when no one sees me. So here's your invitation. Stop fearing the quiet. Stop filling every blank space with noise. Let solitude be your teacher. Let it show you what you've been too busy to see, that everything you were trying to find in others, you already have within yourself. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to begin. Because fulfillment doesn't come from being constantly surrounded. It comes from being deeply grounded in who you are, in what you need, and in the quiet confidence that you can stand alone and still feel whole.